My name is Liz Wheeler. I host the show Tipping Point on One America News Network. It's a nightly, thank you, it's a nightly hour-long opinion commentary news program. So we're talking about the news of the day and everything crazy that's going on as it's happening. I also wrote a book called Tipping Points, How to Topple the Left's House of Cards, which talks about what I do on the show and how everyone can debunk leftist talking points, which is so important to what we're doing. So I want to start today by saying thank you to Students for Life, Live Action, the Alliance Defending Freedom, and the Heritage Foundation for hosting this incredible event, the National Pro-Life Summit. And I want to say a big thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your days to come here with all of us who share the same views about the dignity of all human life. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for coming to this specific event. I want to start my talk by asking you a question. Do you guys follow the news a lot? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm hoping that you haven't heard this story. Did you guys hear the story about the PhD student at the University of Chicago? His name is Steve Jacobs, who was told that he was too white, too male, and too Christian to write his dissertation on abortion. Have you guys heard this story? Good. I don't know where I was going to go if you had. Okay, so he decided to write his dissertation on the questions that are in people's minds when they're making their decision about whether to be pro-life or pro-abortion. What holds pro-abortion people back from being pro-life? What people look to as the authority in this big debate in our country? But he encountered a faculty at the University of Chicago who did not want to attach their names to his dissertation. They didn't want to be a part of it, told him he was, a white Christian male and had no right to talk about abortion. Fortunately, thank God, this did not stop Steve Jacobs. It took him a decade to accomplish this, but he did because he kept persevering. He did. His scientific study, it's about to be published, his dissertation, it's a scientific survey and it has 2 parts, and it's just fascinating. I want each and every one of you in this room to commit this to memory because it's one of the most powerful tools that we have in the pro-life movement today. So his scientific survey was 2 parts. The first part, he surveyed 2,899, to be exact, American adults. He asked them, who is the ultimate authority, or who is most authoritative on the question of when a human's life begins? Who should tell us when a life begins? 81%, well, yes, but 81% of American adults said academic biologists were the most authoritative in determining when life begins. And you can disagree with that for religious reasons, as somebody in the audience yelled, and I certainly do, but it's very interesting to know that 81% said biologists are the most qualified. So that's the first part of the survey. The second part of the survey, Steve Jacobs surveyed 5,502 academic biologists from all around the world, not just in the United States, and he asked them the question, when does a human life begin? 95% of these biologists said life begins at conception. That would be, to be exact, 5,212 academic biologists out of a total of 5,502. 95% of them answered life begins at conception. Do you want to know what the other 5% said? Yes, you do. These are some of the responses. These are verbatim quotes from some of the other 5%. Quote, is this a study funded by Trump and the KKK? Sure hope you aren't an effing Christian. I believe it's a horribly manipulative survey, and its end is to support the religious patriarchal abuse of women's rights that has gone on for far too long. Real scientists. Real scientists. All right, so 95% of the ones who weren't blinded by their own agenda answered life begins at conception. So why is this story important? This is not a rhetorical question, because every person in this room today, or listening on the live stream, we are leaders. We are history makers. That's the thesis of this portion of this program. We are history makers. We are leaders. And in that role, as leaders and as history makers, it requires us to master the day-to-day battles in the culture war. to answer the latest and the ever-evolving arguments that come from the pro-abortion left, the arguments that they hurl at vulnerable women and at voters to try to get us to support abortion. We must never forget that we are on the cusp of victory in the abortion debate. We are changing hearts and minds. We are changing laws in the states, and we're this close, God willing, to overturning Roe v. Wade. So what happens once Roe v. Wade is overturned? It certainly doesn't illegalize abortion. It just gives it back to the states, just like there was abortion before Roe v. Wade in certain states. So what that comes down to then is the culture wars. It comes down to the battles, the day-to-day battles for the hearts and minds of the American people. We in the pro-life side are winning that battle, hands down, right now in our country. But the moment that Roe v. Wade is overturned, the pro-abortion lobby and the pro-abortion left are going to put every resource that they have, every ounce of energy in their bodies, and they're going to assault the culture again to try to change people's minds back so that downstream of culture, the legislation goes back into effect someday. That will be their ultimate goal to once again make abortion legal. So that leaves it up to us to make sure that we never for 1 second grow weak or weary or tired or unprepared, that we are always ready at the drop of a hat to answer the latest ever-evolving talking points from the left. So that's what I'm gonna do tonight. Tonight, we're gonna talk about the 5 most recent abortion-related talking points, the biggest lies about abortion, and how to debunk them. You ready? Okay, so the first one, of course, is when does life begin? I think a lot of us in this room are people of faith. We believe that all life is created by God, made in God's image, and therefore every person, as our founding documents say, are endowed with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's a good belief that many of us share, but that doesn't speak to people who aren't religious in our country. And so we have to go back to the story of Steve Jacobs, the academic biologist, and the authority on when life begins, because that is the heart of the matter. If life begins at conception, then what right do we have to end that life? We have to be able to answer that, and that's number 1. That's the talking point that is always going to be in existence, no matter, as long as we are debating abortion. The second one, of course, is one of the most heartrending, the most tragic. It's actually even difficult to talk about from a podium, and that would be instances of rape and incest. I think most of us in this room have had conversations with pro-abortion advocates or even people outside of politics who are friends who may say, I'm pro-life personally, but pro-choice politically, because how can you force a woman who's been raped to carry that child? And if you're anything like me, when you experience these conversations, it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to hear that that woman has undergone that trauma and that she's been damaged in that way and that her rights have been violated. And it's difficult to answer because you don't want to seem, because of course we aren't, uncompassionate of the trauma that that woman has experienced. And we owe these women not just our advocacy and our support and our love, but our legal advocacy. The perpetrators of rape are some of the people in our country who get away with the most crimes at the highest levels, and we as pro-lifers should always be speaking out legally for harsher penalties for rapists. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing that we need to talk about when we're speaking to this very small minority of abortions, it's 1% of abortions are due to rape and less than 0.5% are due to incest. We have to go back to the heart of the matter. If life begins at conception, which science says it does, what right do we have to end that person's life? And then we have to take it one step further. We have to say, if we pick and choose which people in our country have rights and which people don't, then where does that end? Haven't we been there before in our country, where certain demographics are protected and certain demographics are not? Look at our nation's history: slavery, Jim Crow laws, the subjugation of women, internment camps of Japanese Americans. We've already experienced in our country when certain demographics are afforded protection under the law and certain demographics are not. What makes unborn babies different? There is no different, and you need to talk about that. We need to be able to handle that question when it comes from both the pro-abortion lobby and well-meaning people who are simply misguided or misinformed about the prevalence of abortions that stem from tragic situations of rape and incest. That's the second thing that we need to be comfortable with. The third most recent talking point, did you guys watch the Golden Globes Awards? Did you see actress Michelle Williams get up there with her shiny statue and say, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had an abortion. Abortion was what enabled me, empowered me, she said, to be successful. Did you guys see that video? Again, my heart broke when I saw that video because I thought, my goodness, who has told this woman that women are so weak that we can't do it both? We can't have both things, children and a career. And she's propagating this message. Yeah, clap for that. And that word that feminists and pro-abortion advocates use so often, empowering, what part of that message is empowering? It's simply not. It's not. It's insulting to women to say that in order to be successful in your career, to be equal to men, you have to sacrifice the soul of a human being for a brittle, shiny statue on a shelf. And I don't need to tell you that there are myriads and myriads of successful women, even in politics, who have done both. Nikki Haley, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Rachel Campos Duffy, Lila Rose as a new mom. These women do it both. All right, so the next talking point is a difficult talking point. Were you guys at the March for Life yesterday? Did you see the protester that had the sign that had a picture of a coat hanger painted on it? Right, so that's one of the arguments that the left gives us. They say if we prohibit abortion, if we illegalize abortion, it's not going to stop abortion, they tell us. It's just going to stop legal abortion, and they call it safe abortion. Now, we could certainly argue that point, but that's what they say. They say women will still get abortions, they'll just do it illegally. They'll resort to back alley abortions and coat hanger abortions. So our question is that true? Will that really happen? Is that what's going to happen? We don't have to have a philosophical debate about this. We have facts, we have data, and we ought to know this because this is one of the most currently commonly deployed talking points from the left. Here are the facts. It's a tragedy when any woman and any child dies in any way, particularly through abortion. Democrats have told us in the past that 1.2 million women have died from coat hanger abortions in our country. That, by the way, is false. According to the CDC, in 1972, which was the year before Roe v. Wade, 39 women died from illegal abortion. In 1972, 24 women also died from legal abortion. Abortion was legal in some states before Roe, remember? Then in 1973, again, according to the CDC, this is the year after Roe, so abortion was legal, 19 women died from illegal abortion, and 25 women died from legal abortion. That means the year after Roe legalized abortion, more women died of legal abortion than had died the previous year from legal abortion. When the pro-abortion left tells us that over 1 million women died, you deploy the facts. You tell them that in 2014, 6 women died from legal abortion. In 2008, 12 women died from legal abortion. Abortion is never safe. It's certainly not safe for the baby, and it's not safe for the mother either. That's the fourth talking point. The fifth talking point, and you guys have probably heard this as well. This is a very common, actually, a guest that I had on my show last night, a Democrat, I talked to him about the abortion debate, and he made the allegation, he said, pro-lifers aren't really pro-life because they don't care about babies outside the womb. And I said, oh, I'm glad you brought this up. I said to him, let's talk about this topic. Let's talk about this. Okay, so I think we all know that that's false. But do we know why? Can we condense that into 30 seconds or a minute? Why? Here's how to do it. Pro-lifers, who also tend to be conservative, not all, but they tend to be conservative, tend to be Christian, not all, but a lot, they champion traditional marriage. Children are 82% less likely to live in poverty if their parents are married. 82% less likely. If you want to talk about how to best care for children, then you talk about your advocacy for marriage, because marriage is the best institution to take care of a child. Pro-lifers run crisis pregnancy centers, not just for women during their pregnancy, which is wonderful, but for women and their babies after pregnancy, diapers, formula, parenting classes, support groups for years after that baby is born. Pro-lifers support church groups and community programs specifically targeted for single moms. More pro-lifers are foster parents and adoptive parents than any other demographic of people in our country. Pro-lifers support a free market economy which helps to raise prosperity for our nation, which helps to raise the individual prosperity and quality of life of every single person in this nation. At the same time, pro-lifers and traditional conservatives support a government safety net for those who are truly in need. And as individuals, every person in this room who is a conservative gives more personal charity, their money to personal charity, than any Democrat does. So don't come at me and tell me that pro-lifers only care about babies in the womb. We put our money where our mouth is. We care about people from the moment of conception until natural death. We are leaders in this room. You took the time out of your day to come here. We are history makers. We are this close to a post-Roe America. But make no mistake, we're winning this battle because we're winning the culture war, changing hearts and minds on abortion. And once we win, we must keep fighting because the pro-abortion left knows that they too must win the culture war on abortion to impact abortion law. Forgive the pun here, but we are at a tipping point to this post-Roe America. So we must stay vigilant in this culture war and know that at a moment's notice, each and every person in this room must know how to debunk the latest, the ever-evolving, the nuanced advertising that the abortion industry hurls at vulnerable women in order to be able to tell our children someday that Roe was overturned, abortion is illegal, and culturally, from coast to coast, the American people reject abortion and embrace life. Thank you. Follow me on Instagram at Liz_OANN or on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.